So I've told you about the creative thinking tool of stepping stones. The idea that by giving the mind an outrageous scenario or crisis, you can often generate ideas that you wouldn't otherwise if you thought you had all the resources that you have in the status quo. You escape to a crisis, pay attention to what you would do in that, and then move back into in the status quo to implement some solutions or changes. A great example of this, and one that I've written up extensively in a book that I wrote, Accelerating Healthcare Transformation with Lean and Innovation, the Virginia Mason experience. Virginia Mason is a large hospital and multi-specialty group in Seattle. The situation here is that they were doing a redesign for the emergency department. They were moving into a new space. They were going to build a new hospital tower, and they wanted to rethink flow and experience in the emergency department. The architects that were working with them told them that given the population that they served, the catchment area, they needed an ED of so many square feet. And they said, no, we don't have that. That's going to take up way too much space. It's far too large a footprint. We'd like to figure out how to do it with a little bit less space than that. Well, they chartered a variety of teams to do some creative thinking on this. And one of the teams was given a stepping stones provocation. Let me read it to you because I think it illustrates a lot about how to form a good scenario to really get people thinking. You've just been offered a great job as Director of Patient Flow for a new hospital that's scheduled to open next month. You can't believe the salary offer they made you. It was 3 times the salary you earned before. The interview process was a little weird in that they came to your home to interview you, and now that you think about it, you don't really know that much about this new organization. But the salary offer was something you couldn't refuse, and now that you think about it, maybe you shouldn't have signed that 5-year contract that locks you in, that says that if you quit before 5 years, you have to pay back all the salary you've earned and double it with a penalty. But hey, what could go wrong? Well, you've moved your family and you've shown up for day one at work, and now you know what could go wrong. Someone designed this brand new hospital without an emergency room. Oh, that's why they need a director of patient flow. It's your job to figure out how patients who show up at the hospital as unplanned admissions will be handled. You'll find that there's a space the size of a small conference room that's not been dedicated to anything else, and you can have that space, but that's it. What are you going to do? When I gave the team that stepping stones provocation, they looked at me kind of weird. I said, no, really, what would you do if the emergency department had to fit within the size of a small conference room? Well, they generated lots of wonderful ideas. They connected and rearranged lots of knowledge in their minds. Some things that were known were, there's been a variety of studies that show that on average, patients that come into emergency departments only spend 6 or 8 or 10 minutes in the presence of healthcare providers. The rest of the time is spent in waiting, in moving from step to step to step in the traditional flow in an ED. Another piece of data that the research has shown is that actually the first healthcare professional, usually the triage nurse who sees the patient, if you ask them at that point of just first laying their eyes on the patients and having a little bit of interaction with them, what do you think, what does your intuition tell you? Is this a patient that's going to be admitted eventually or discharged to home? That they're accurate in a large percentage of cases. You just know. Well, those pieces of knowledge and research were put together with this challenge of how to fit the emergency department in a small space. Basically, what they came up with was a kind of a flow system. They realized that patients would have to come into the small space. They should be greeted by a full team of the people that they need to interact with, rather than interacting with them on a sequential basis and waiting in between. They needed to have very close access of simple diagnostics and simple things just to be able to figure out what's going on. And then you wanted to get the patient out of that small room as quickly as possible because you knew that another one was coming in. Well, those ideas that came from the escape of the stepping stones provocation were then moved back into the, uh, the the process of designing the new ED space. The emergency department at Virginia Mason has now some interesting, innovative features. When you come in, you find a very, very small waiting space. There's not a lot of people sitting around waiting. In fact, when you come in, the first person that you're greeted by is not a registration clerk that that takes your information and asks you to wait. It's a healthcare professional, and that professional is there to initially assess you. Uh, that person puts you in one of three streams in the emergency department. The first stream is sort of a rapid care thing for simple kinds of conditions that can be dealt with in a protocol-driven, nurse-based care way. Say, for example, you're having an asthma attack and you need a breathing treatment. Let's get you into the fast track, do that, and you'll be discharged in a matter of minutes. The whole thing happens very, very quickly. A second flow is the flow for those patients that the intuition tells the first little workup and maybe a little bit of diagnostics say this is a patient that needs to be admitted. We're not going to hold them in the ED space like most hospitals do to do an extensive workup and then send them up to the floor. We're going to immediately ask the floor to see if they have a cleared bed, send someone down to pick up this patient. The floors try to stay a bed ahead. They always try to have an empty bed, knowing that somebody from the ED department might be flowing up. Those patients are stabilized and cared for in a separate space called the care unit, where they're just held and made sure they're okay until they're ready to go up on the floor. The third flow is the traditional emergency department flow. They go deepest into the ED, and they're treated by emergency medical physicians and nurse practitioners and nurses in the usual way. But what this does is it allows those people who are doing the true emergency department care to focus really on those cases that are complex, puzzling, difficult to figure out, because they're not running around from exam room to exam room dealing with smaller things like asthma attacks or things where we're just holding the patient until we can send them up to the floor. Patient satisfaction is very high with this system. Staff satisfaction is very high because they get to focus their work. The nurses who do the nurse-driven protocols love the work they're doing. The ED physicians love the work that they're doing in the back. They also come out and supervise the front areas on a regular basis. Clinical care is top-notch. It's a great place. All of that came out of the suggestion, the outrageous suggestion, that you would have a hospital whose emergency department was only the size of a small conference room. That's a stepping stone provocation, and that's the power behind it.